Well, Anne Fitzgerald is the director of the Balsillie School of International Affairs and a professor of international security at Wilfrid Laurier University. She joins me live now. So the truce talks mediated by the US and Saudi Arabia have collapsed. The ceasefire over the weekend hasn't lasted. The situation in Sudan is worryingly a long way from being resolved, if not escalating further now. Would you agree with that?
I think you're absolutely right.
On what grounds?
Well, the humanitarian situation is dire. The truce breaking down also opens up enabling space for the fighting to intensify, and I think reports suggesting that there are movements on both sides to mobilize forces from outside of Khartoum. The the Sudanese Armed Forces mobilizing their different regional divisions, and the RSF mobilizing from their Western Darfur-based strategic homeland means that I think the next milestone we will see in this fighting will be a battle for Khartoum. And it's pretty divided at the moment, and reports from sources on the ground and former students of my own who are still in Khartoum say that, quote, it is jammed with the military. And, the Sudanese Armed Forces commands air power, which is, one could argue, a strong advantage. But the RSF is a significantly sized force which has experience in other land warfare theaters of operations and which has strongholds across the city, particularly in Omdurman, which is the neighboring city of Khartoum, and Bari. So this is going to be a playoff I think we'll see take off over the coming days.
Is it fair to say that many people have understood that Saudi Arabia and the US had quite a hold on these warring generals, or really is that not the case at all?
Well, I think the US and Saudi Arabia are the two trusted partners in these talks. And I think Saudi Arabia in particular, a country which has benefited from the support of both the Sudanese Armed Forces and the RSF in the fight against militants in Yemen, could play a major role in bringing these groups back to the table. But it's worrying because both groups have said in their own words that they are not committed to a political settlement. We've seen 7 humanitarian truces and temporary ceasefires being agreed, all of which have broken down. But these ceasefires were based on a temporary agreement to provide humanitarian support and make humanitarian corridors for the protection of civilians, not for an enduring political settlement.
And this is not just about Sudan, though, is it? The enormous displacement of people in that country is now destabilising neighbouring countries. So this situation is spreading, if you like.
Indeed. And reports suggest that over 50% of the population in the country's capital, Khartoum, have fled. About a quarter of that population has fled the country, which include IDP camps on the other side of borders, like in the Central African Republic or Chad and Ethiopia, and to Egypt and to Jeddah and elsewhere via Port Sudan. And there are another quarter of the population that has fled the cities that has gone into the countryside. But I think it's important to remember that not everybody, in fact, a good chunk of the population does not have the means and capability to leave the city. So at the same time, we're seeing critical infrastructure being targeted by air power. This is leading to breakdowns in electricity. It's leading to the infrastructure supporting what they call the water sublines. which purifies water from the Nile, being affected and destroyed. And this is a critical time for water, because this is the period of time when the long rains start. We've seen disastrous flooding take place during this time last year and in 2020, where there was a national disaster declared, and there was no war going on there. So when we're already in a dire humanitarian crisis, with the flooding, that could all lead to all sorts of water-based disease breaking out and spreading, and that will compound, undoubtedly, the existing humanitarian crisis.
OK, Anne Fitzgerald, thank you very much for joining us on the News Hour live from Canada.